Silent Hill 2 seems to have proven everybody wrong. The Game of the Year contender, absolutely gorgeous, one of the best games, most essential games of the year. I genuinely, I didn't see this coming, and I don't think Konami did either.
No.
And I think Konami, not necessarily wanted to sabotage the damn thing, but like the way that it rolled out, the bits and pieces of the gameplay that they showed, where Bloober Team themselves, the developers, had to get out there and go, the game's better than what they're showing. Trust us. It's not just quick time events. There's more to it. And then obviously the review scores have been sky high. And then across the last few days, people have actually picked it up and gone like, okay, this is genuinely great.
Yeah, it really is as well, Scott. Like you said there, I think even us two as like Bloober Team apologists and Bloober Team fans for
They've got some good
the
work.
past few years. They do have some good games.
Maybe only 1 or 2 projects, but they're good.
I think even we, though, didn't expect just how good this thing is. I have not finished it yet. I'm about 7 or 8 hours into the game, and this feels like a step up from their previous work. This feels like the complete package that they've kind of hinted they're capable of across the past decade or so. I cannot believe how much of a Game of the Year contender it has been. To me, it's been unreal, man. Like, I had high hopes anyway after the reviews, but locking in to just play it with headphones on over the weekend, I can't believe how much they've got right. I kind of don't even know where to start. I guess just general atmosphere and the general story. The atmosphere is as thick as the Silent Hill fog, Scott. And
well, so this, I want to ask this, right? Because we've both grown up around, like, along Silent Hill. Like, that franchise had such a weight to it. Like, it was always up against Resident Evil in terms of contemporary horror conversations of the time. But Silent Hill, especially Silent Hill 2, is where it really started to take off, where it was so genuinely terrifying. And I felt like it tied into the wider sort of Eastern horror wave that was the early 2000s, like The Grudge and The Ring in movies. And, like, it felt like gaming's version of that. And it was such a confident step forward and such a person, like, it's such an identifiable series of elements, whether it's the nurses or the way they move or the fog or like the story itself and the way that goes and the amount of weight that's behind it. And it's almost impossible to recapture that. And it's interesting if you do another Resi comparison. Resident Evil 2 Remake is so completely different from the original RE2. Whilst having, like, you know, certain elements that are reconstructed. And this felt like initially they were chasing that too much, where it's like, okay, we can't even touch Silent Hill 2 because it's too big of a deal. So we're going to do a Resident Evil 2 remake, and we're just going to throw the camera behind James, and that's what you do. But then it seems like how do they replicate that? It's almost like a feeling of danger, but you can't. It was so of the time of like what it felt like to explore Silent Hill.
No, they do.
Like they managed to somehow get that.
They managed to get it, and that's maybe the most impressive thing because, like you said, the original, especially because the combat in it is so wonky that you don't want to engage with it. You feel underpowered at all times. But more importantly, Silent Hill itself feels so mysterious and like otherworldly, like literally and figuratively. So they managed to capture that really well. I knew I was in safe hands because both Silent Hills open with you as your character, James Sunderland, kind of like walking into the town itself. And that ominous trek in the sequel, man, I did it twice. I thought it was that good. Nothing even happens. Like, the whole point is just that it's building dread in your kind
That's
of...
cool.
I like, you can't run, but I was like walking. I was just taking in like the details and how good the game looks, like the lighting, the fog, the soundtrack, this kind of like pulsing, unnerving synth that's like in the background.
Oh, you've got me in.
Not the synth you like, a different kind of synth. But it, I'm saying M a lot. It just kind of had that sense that you're like walking into hell. It had a je ne sais quoi. It had the sauce that I didn't expect it to have.
I think anyone did.
No, once you're in Silent Hill itself, and you're getting, you know, like the direct recreations of levels that were in the original game, but cutscenes as well. Like, some cutscenes are very different. Some cutscenes, though, do take the visual style of the original and replicate them with kind of like modern graphics. And those were a joy as well, because the original game is so well directed in terms of its visuals, at the very least, and its compositions and its blocking of scenes. Like, it's very evocative. It's very subtle in its horror sometimes and overt in its horror other times, especially when you get to Pyramid Head and the mannequins and the nurses and whatnot. And they managed to thread that needle really well. A part of my worry going into this remake was, how do you, like you said, Silent Hill 2, the original, is so of its time.
Yeah.
And I think it benefits from a lot of happy accidents of the era. You know, you've got this PS2 game that does look gorgeous, but it has the wonk of some PS2 games, right? It has voice acting that sometimes is really good and sometimes feels a bit unnatural. You've got the same thing with the animations and the facial expressions where it kind of, the jarringness and the wonkiness and the stiltedness of it sometimes works to its benefit because it makes it feel even more otherworldly, right?
Yeah.
Whereas this time around, I think the voice acting is genuinely incredible. Like the guy who plays James is unreal. Like there's an understated, just kind of tragic deepness to him, right? That is just like right down to every word. It's just like he feels like a guy who is tired but is like trying.
Right.
And I'm shocked by how good the voice performance is, how good the cinematics are, and just like I say, how well it's put together overall without sacrificing some of the quirks that made the original so memorable and so weird.
Let's talk. I want to talk about combat in a bit, but James himself, that was one of the biggest red flags when they originally showed off. I think it was the teaser for the Silent Hill 2 remake, where they showed like a really upset looking, over the top in a way, James Sunderland. Sunderland?
I always say Sunderland. I think it's Sunderland.
James. And when they showed that off, a lot of people were like, they're playing too much into the wider ramifications of the story. I'm not going to do spoilers. But it seems like, have they tweaked that intro scene? Does he still look as quote unquote goofy when he looks in the mirror?
I think he's definitely a slightly different model from the one that was first unveiled. I think they changed it mid-development. I remember the later trailers having a different model as well. I think if you weren't around for the kind of question marks that were raised over the initial version of James and what people were wondering if he was going to be too expressive or whatnot, I don't think it would even cross your mind. Like, the character model is great, the voice acting is great. It definitely feels of a piece with the rest of the story. And honestly, man, the James in this is a very interesting character alongside everyone else that's brought in as well.
That's a really good sell, because this story is one of gaming's greatest stories, one of the most iconic stories, like, in media, really. And it's worth people experiencing that. And, like, I'm glad they haven't messed that up. How's combat? Because I know they showed, like I said, quick time events and stuff at the beginning. But how weighty is it compared to the RE remakes? Or, like, just, does it feel good to play?
It does. It feels good. I don't think it's as necessarily satisfying as something like an RE2 or an RE4, but it feels good, and it feels heavy, and it has the weight that I want from Silent Hill, because you are just some guy with a plank of wood and maybe a pistol and a shotgun later on, or whatever it is. And they managed to make it's the best, like, the bar is in hell, but it's like, a lot of people have said this, it's the best Silent Hill combat.
Right.
That doesn't mean it's the best playing third-person shoot you're ever going to play, but it definitely is satisfying, and they have upped the combat encounters, they have upped the amount of enemies, but it feels intense as it should. It feels like you have enough firepower to be offensive, but you're going to be missing shots. You're going to be still in situations where you're feeling overwhelmed and you start scrambling and you get worried and whatnot. So the combat itself feels good, at least at this early stage. It actually reminds me, both the combat and the exploration, as much as it is obviously cribbing from Resident Evil 2 Remake, it feels very inspired by The Last of Us Part 2.
Right.
For instance, you have like these mini open areas around Silent Hill that kind of are evocative of exploring Seattle in The Last of Us, or exploring the kind of open areas in The Last of Us 2, right down to, you know, smashing the windows of shops so you can jump through and then investigate what's going on in the building. And you're obviously looting for supplies, health supplies, ammo and whatnot, and you're kind of raking around in cupboards. So it has this nice blend of RE2 style combat and Last of Us style exploration.
Right. Okay.
I like that a lot, Scott. I think that makes it sort of has the Evil Within 2 vibe of making every kind of shop or apartment building or whatever like feel bespoke, but feel worth exploring, and kind of like Silent Hill feels like a place, even though it has all of this supernatural element to it. It feels like a place.
I want to do the obvious question, which is the one that everyone's going to, although I'm already seeing the answers to this question online. Do you prefer it to the original?
No, I mean, not right now. I'll need to figure it out when I finish it. The original is one of my top 5 games of all time, you know? I think it's everything that's great about, like, truly great about this sequel is informed by the original in some way, whether it is the town itself, whether it is the cinematics, whether it is the voice acting and the characterization. Like, it is a proper sequel it's a proper remake, in that way. So I'll be surprised if I like the remake over the original, but that doesn't mean it doesn't, like, I'm so pleased it exists. And I'm really, based on this, I can't wait to see what Bloober Team does with the franchise going forward, if they're given a chance to remake 1 or remake 3 again, because I want to see what they look like in this engine.
The thing is, with the wider franchise stuff, like, I was thinking this as soon as the reviews dropped for Silent Hill 2 Remake, and they're like, oh, it's 5-star, 10 out of 10, I was like, okay, this kind of feels like it changes everything. Because I feel like the way the Konami's handled the revival of Silent Hill, like, Silent Hill Ascension was terrible, like the live stream game, it was like the It's Trauma sticker, like, you couldn't get further away from, like, the weight that's supposed to be there for the franchise, and obviously it was received horribly, and I don't even think that thing's still going anymore. If it is, no one's talking about it. There was Silent Hill The Short Message, which was like their attempt at doing like a free, almost PT-like thing to get people to play, but then that was really badly handled. Some elements in there that were worthwhile, but it didn't seem like it landed very well.
It was mid.
Yeah. And then the rollout for Silent Hill 2 was terrible until literally the embargo day, which kind of did a 180. And then I've not looked into sales, but I'm assuming it's doing okay. It's in the top 10 on the PSN search bar. So there is that. And then it's like, okay, we have Silent Hill F still to come. There's Silent Hill Townfall still to come, which are obviously 2 new installments. But Silent Hill 2, from the breadth of the existing games, felt like the home run, the fan one, the one that you remake because that's the one that everyone knows. But if you were going to remake them, then you would, obviously, at some point, are people going to come out of this going, okay, you should plug in the other installments, or is this the one and done? Like, same with the Metal Gear stuff. Like, is Konami going to go and remake Metal Gear 1, Metal Gear 2, whatever, in the engine that they've got for Metal Gear 3? Like, Konami at the minute have a different approach to franchises than, like, other people do.
I know. They're in a difficult situation, right? And I'll tell you for why. It's because the next natural step, I think, is to do Silent Hill 3. Like, that is maybe not considered to be as good as 2, but I think it's just as well known. Like, if you think about Silent Hill, maybe you'll think of images from the 3rd game even over the 2nd game. For some people, I think, just because it is.
If you're an old fart, it's the original one. But, I'm 1 and 2, but yeah.
I'm also 1 and 2. I didn't come to 3 later on, but I just think of like if I think of like the imagery that has lasted since then, it's a lot from Silent Hill 3 and Heather's story. But while that might make the most natural sense, especially because, it only came a few years after 2, working with a lot of the same assets and same engine and whatever, like, you can't really tell 3's story without 1, because it is a direct sequel in a way that 2 just isn't. 2 is a standalone story. So I don't know if you can go straight to 3 without doing 1, because then you may rob it of some of its impact, but then it would be way more work to remake 1 because it's, a PS1 game. It is clunkier than 2 and 3. I love 1. I think it's amazing. I think it's definitely worth doing, but it's just it's a bigger job than doing 3, I think.
It just feels like an overall conversation that they now need to have. Like, I guess assumedly, obviously you don't set out to make bad games or anything, but you would, like, I don't know how much they planned. Like, okay, if this hits, then we're going to do these other ones in this order, because there's the movie as well. Christoph Gans is coming back to do another Silent Hill movie, and it's like in the original Silent Hill movie was like kind of inspired by Silent Hill 2. Like, you've got different bits and pieces of like those original games. So I just think overall there's an interesting conversation on like, where does the franchise land? Does it feel revived? Does it feel like this is, because it's so fundamentally a remake, something for an audience that already exists? Are you trying to bring new people in? That's assumedly what Townfall and F will do, because Ascension and Short Message didn't do that. So it's like, I just think it's really interesting where they're at, and this attempt of just picking a middle game to do is like really weird.
It is. It's funny because I know Resident Evil 1 had a remake, back on the GameCube, which was then ported to the PlayStation and Xbox and what have you. But to me, it's kind of like, well, Capcom just did Resident Evil 2 and everyone loved it. Why can't we just do Silent Hill 2? And again, because it is that kind of standalone game, they can kind of get away with it. Like, I know they would never have done this because it is an obvious remake, but they could have just called it Silent Hill and then said, like, it's a reimagining, or it's even an outright remake of the 2nd game, but this is where we're starting, and then we're going to go here and there and have callbacks or what have you. I think it's a great project. I can't wait to go home and play more. I hope it sticks the landing in the second half. It's gorgeous. Its soundscape is unreal. I think you'll really appreciate that, Scott, when you're playing with headphones on. The dread that's conveyed, the footsteps of the enemies and stuff. It's just it nails that atmosphere. And yeah, I'm really excited to see how they handle that story. I'm playing it with my partner, and she, even though she's played it with me before, it was so long ago that she was saying, "Oh, how does this game go again?"
Oh,
and
that's
I
fun.
thought, buddy, if they nail it, you'll be not forgetting how this game goes, because that story is so interesting.
Not to literally be the Paul Rudd meme, but it's 2024 and Silent Hill 2 Remake is good. Who'd have thunk?
Sorry, I got one more thing.
Yes.
Let me tell you about the fog, Scott. I know I mentioned right at the start. The fog is good. And I'll tell you what to get right about the fog, Scott. Not only does it look great, not only is the lighting amazing with it, but they don't sacrifice the draw distance that made the original so scary, where you could only see like 10 feet in front of you and enemies were emerging from it. This fog is thick. And the game is all the better for it.
That's the thing. Back in the day, and maybe it's just because I was younger, but I feel like just the way the industry was and where technology was, your mind made that work. Yeah. And I think when you think back on Silent Hill, if you think of the first 3 games or whatever, you'll fill those screenshots out in a way in your mind. But obviously, when you look at them, it's like, oh, there's 3 buildings and there's a hard cut off and whatever. That's like an exponentially effective step up that I think, like, you don't realize how big of a deal that is until you start playing it.
Yeah.
But oh man, I wasn't going to bother with this, and now I'm like, I'm going to have to touch this now.
I think I don't know if it's going to be Game of the Year, Scott, but it's climbing up the ranks is all I can say.